The humid air of Manila buzzed with life, jeepneys honking, vendors shouting, and the faint aroma of roasted corn drifting through the narrow streets. Amid the chaos stood Raphael, a thin 15-year-old boy holding a battered violin with missing varnish and a single crack along its neck. He positioned himself near the old stone church where his mother used to bring him every Sunday. That spot was sacred to him. It was where she first placed the bow in his tiny hands and whispered, "Let your heart play, not your fingers." Now, years later, she was gone, but her voice still echoed in every note. Raphael raised his bow, and the first soft chords of "Nearer My God to Thee" floated through the warm evening air. The melody was haunting, trembling, and full of longing. Passers-by slowed down, some dropped coins, others just watched silently. Even the street noise seemed to soften, as if the whole city paused to listen to his prayer in music form. Behind him, a young tourist stopped to record the boy with her phone. She could feel something divine in his playing, like the violin was crying out for heaven itself. When Raphael finished, he smiled shyly and bowed. He gathered his few pesos and tucked them carefully into his pocket, never imagining that his life was about to change. That night, the tourist uploaded the video with the caption, "Poor Filipino boy plays like an angel." By morning, it had reached millions of views. The clip traveled across continents, landing on the screens of the America's Got Talent producers. And as Raphael tuned his violin once more, unaware of the world watching him, destiny was already tuning the next great performance of his life. The towering lights of Los Angeles felt blinding compared to the dim glow of Manila's street lamps. Raphael clutched his old violin case as he stepped out of the airport, his heart pounding in disbelief. Everything around him seemed larger than life: glass buildings, flashing billboards, and faces that didn't know his name. Yet, inside that case was the only thing that ever made him feel at home. When the day of his America's Got Talent audition arrived, Raphael stood backstage, trembling. Around him, contestants laughed, stretched, and tuned their instruments. He stayed quiet, whispering a prayer under his breath. "Mama, please, be with me." His name was called. A stagehand guided him forward, and suddenly, he was under the blinding spotlight, facing thousands of people and four of the most famous judges in the world. Simon Cowell leaned forward with his familiar, unreadable expression. "Hello, young man, what's your name?" "Raphael, sir. I'm from the Philippines," he stammered. The crowd cheered softly, but Raphael's hands were shaking. "And what will you be playing today?" Simon asked. He took a deep breath. "A song my mother loved, Nearer, My God, to Thee." The audience grew quiet. The lights dimmed. Raphael raised his bow, closing his eyes as the first trembling note escaped his violin. It was soft, almost fragile, like a child's prayer carried by wind. The melody grew stronger with each bar, and Raphael lost himself in it. Every vibration of the string was a heartbeat, every note a memory of his mother. By the time he reached the song's middle verse, the audience had fallen utterly silent. For the first time in his life, the world wasn't hearing a poor boy play a violin. They were hearing his soul speak. As Raphael's bow glided across the strings, the theater fell into a silence so pure it felt sacred. The haunting melody of "Nearer, My God, to Thee" echoed through the vast auditorium, every note trembling with emotion. His hands moved delicately, yet with purpose, as if guided by something greater than himself. The music wasn't just being played, it was being felt. Images of his mother filled his mind, her warm smile, her tired hands sewing late into the night, and her voice whispering prayers before bed. Each memory poured into the violin. The sound grew more powerful, rising and falling like waves of grief and love intertwined. His bowstrings glistened under the stage lights, and tears slipped down his cheeks, but he didn't stop. The audience was transfixed. Parents held their children's hands. A woman in the front row wept openly. Even the judges, who had seen thousands of performers, sat frozen. Heidi leaned forward, eyes glistening. Howie covered his mouth. Sophia whispered softly, "Oh my God." Then, the camera panned to Simon. His stern composure had melted away. His eyes were glassy, his expression vulnerable. As Raphael reached the final note, a long, trembling sound that seemed to stretch toward heaven, Simon blinked rapidly, trying to hold back tears. The last vibration faded, leaving only silence. No one moved, no one breathed. For a few seconds, time itself seemed suspended. Then, a single clap broke the stillness, followed by another, until the entire audience erupted into a standing ovation. Raphael stood frozen in disbelief, clutching his violin, eyes wide and wet. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just a poor street boy playing for coins. He was a musician who had touched the hearts of millions. The roar of applause filled the theater like a tidal wave. Golden lights shimmered on the stage as Raphael stood frozen, his violin still pressed to his chest. Tears streamed down his face, but he wasn't sure if they were from joy, disbelief, or relief. All he could hear was the thunder of clapping hands and the sound of people shouting his name. Heidi rose first, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Raphael," she said, her voice trembling, "that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard." It wasn't just music, it was a prayer. Sophia nodded, her voice cracking. "You made all of us feel something we can't even describe." Howie leaned forward, smiling gently. "You reminded us why this show exists, to find people like you, who bring the world together through heart." Then all eyes turned to Simon. The theater quieted again. Simon leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. His usual sharp tone was gone. He looked at the boy with soft, almost fatherly eyes. "Raphael," he said slowly, "I've seen thousands of acts. I've judged every kind of talent. But what you did just now," he paused, his voice faltering, "was divine." The crowd gasped as Simon stood up, something he rarely did, and pressed the golden buzzer. In that instant, a storm of golden confetti rained down from the ceiling, swirling around Raphael like a miracle. He covered his face, sobbing as the glitter fell on his shoulders and violin. The judges rushed the stage. Simon placed a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered, "Your mother would be so proud." The audience chanted his name, "Raphael. Raphael," as he lifted his violin high, bathed in golden grace. Weeks after his life-changing performance, Raphael stood once again beneath the old stone church in Manila, the same place where everything began. The afternoon sun painted the sky gold, and a soft breeze rustled through the palm trees. Children gathered around him, wide-eyed, as he unpacked his now famous violin. The scratches and cracks were still there, but they no longer looked like flaws, they were symbols of his journey. A camera crew had come from a local news station. Reporters spoke excitedly about how the Filipino street violinist who made Simon Cowell cry had become a global sensation. Donations had poured in from around the world. Music schools had offered him scholarships. Yet, despite the fame and offers, Raphael chose to return home first. He wanted to play for the people who first believed in him. He smiled shyly at the crowd and said, "This song is for every poor child with a dream, and every mother who never stopped praying." Then he raised his bow and began to play, "Nearer, my God, to thee," once more. This time, it wasn't about survival or competition, it was gratitude. His music floated through the air, reaching the hearts of those who stopped to listen, just like before. A little girl in the front whispered to her mother, "Mama, I want to play the violin too." As the final note faded, the church bells rang in harmony, as if the heavens themselves were applauding. Across the ocean, Simon Cowell watched the performance clip on his tablet. A soft smile spread across his face as he murmured, "He reminded us there's still beauty in this world." And in that moment, Raphael's music, born from poverty and pain, had become a prayer that touched the world forever.